About some news, and this is the one that we were just talking about. Not that one, this one. The Department of Homeland Security inspects your cell phone at the border. And the privacy advocates were always very upset about this. They do it with no warranty. They do it with no warrant, and they don't tell you what they're doing with the data. And it turns out that what they have been doing with the data is the worst case. They've been copying everything off the phone for up to 10,000 phones and saving it to a government database, which is then visible to about 3,000 people, and it's very unclear what the rules are for them to use it. And they're claiming, oh, there's sufficient oversight, but it's hard to believe that since nobody even knows what the rules are. Yeah?
There was a professor out in Michigan, and he has consulting business in China. When he come back, the border police say want to get into his laptops, two Apple laptops.
Yeah.
And they say no, and then the government arrest him, and then later on indict him, saying he's spying.
Yes.
And then it's like he got get government contract, energy department contract, research grant, and not disclosing that he has ties in China. And then they make a big deal out of it. And then a couple of months later, they drop the charges.
So he didn't go to prison or lose his grant or anything.
I think the damage is done. All is for
Yeah.
2 months.
So he's talking, people can't hear students, right? He's talking about a person who came back from China with a laptop, and the Department of Homeland Security seized it and accused him of spying. He refused to let them see what was on it, and so they held him for months studying this and eventually just dropped charges.
It'd be a big deal if you indict him.
But that's like a pattern
Yeah.
of Asian academics.
Yeah, I think it's a big deal. There's a huge push to worry about spying from China. It's been that way for at least 10 years. I remember Wen-Ho Lee at Lawrence Berkeley Lab. And
But how many of those cases have they actually proven?
not very many, I imagine.
A lot of times they do like a PUT or something, and they pay a fine. And that's normally how they end up.
Yeah, I think this is I think a common refrain. It just amounts to harassment. They end up not charging people, not going to prison, but they harass
They
people.
make a big deal of indicting the guy.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, it's just the accusation alone, in many cases, just enough to.
Yeah, damage your reputation for the guy.
Yes, absolutely. The accusation alone might well make you lose your job and get in trouble and everything. Yeah. Now, there's a claim that there's a huge amount of real Chinese spying. Now, I know there's a lot of Chinese hacking. Google was the testament of that in 2010, that they're hacking and stealing confidential data. There's also a claim that there's a lot of Chinese spying, but I don't know if they've proven that. And it kind of reminds me of the communist scare.
Twitter whistleblowers, they came that there are a lot of Chinese spy, Indian spy working in Twitter, like a couple of days ago.
What was this?
The Twitter whistleblower.
The Twitter whistleblower. Yeah, he said there were some Chinese spies in company. Of course, what
Chinese and Indian spies.
Indian spies, yeah. Now, there's another thing, which Google said when they went to China, which is that when you do business there, they force you to hire local people, and some of the people you hire there are spies. And that sounds more reasonable, but that's not the same thing as people here spying. But there's been a wide accusation of that happening here, and I really don't know how common it is. And this is pretty common, that there's a fear, and then the Customs and Border Protection people just take wild actions based on that fear. Anyway, so the evidence has come out, and I don't remember how they got this, but somehow they found out what they're doing. Oh, they were told in a briefing. They have a massive database that all these people have seen. So anyway, this is, a lot of us suspected this, but now there is some evidence of how much data they're collecting, and now there will be hopefully some inquiries into whether this is legal or not. It will depend on who they're taking it from. If they're non-citizens, this is probably legal. But if they're citizens, I would think this is probably not legal to do this without a search warrant. But I'm sure it will be battled out in court. So VMware was charged with fraud because starting in 2019, they had begun forging their financials. And the way they did it was people would order stuff and they would delay delivering the keys until after the quarter. So they could artificially move some money from this quarter to the next quarter, so they could conceal the fact that their profits were declining. And that amounts to security and exchange fraud. They defraud their financial statements so the investors have a false idea of the company, but they got a very minimal fine for this.
Company do that all the time, right? They move the order around.
Yes, it does sound actually like a relatively minor offense. Yeah, moving things from one quarter to the next. Anyway, they fudged the numbers by a lot, but they ended up paying a relatively small fine. And anyway, that's why, yeah, I'm not sure. I wonder how many other companies do that. Like, this is what Trump says about his real estate, where he changes the valuation for taxes, and he says everybody does it. And I remember in China they do it too. The famous actress did it. You lower your income for paying taxes. It's a common thing. It is a crime though. Yeah. Anyway, so this might explain part
The lawyer
of.
says it's not.
What's that?
The lawyer says it's not.
Lawyer says it's not.
Yeah, that's how they got that. They hire the lawyer to do all that, but then they don't want the government, do the cost. Say no.
Well, the lawyer will probably get him off one way or another. Anyway, we all, I think, experienced the lack of San Francisco policing. Many people I know have had police incidents, and it's very bad now. And it's pointing out, San Francisco police are really understaffed to a really bad extent. They're supposed to have like 1,500, but they're like 1,200, and another 300 are likely to quit by the end of the year. So.
When they arrest somebody, it's like 10, 20 police cars coming. So I don't think
Yes, you're right. They often respond with a ton of cars. Anyway, they are very understaffed for what that's worth, or so they say. This may explain why they're doing such a bad job lately, which they really are. This, I thought, is pretty incredible. They had a gun buyback program, and the gun buyback program said they would buy handguns and they would buy kits, ghost handguns and ghost assault rifles, and so, including gun parts. So what this person did was just go on a 3D printer and print 60 auto sears. These are just little clips you put in a gun to make it fire more, and they sold them for like $20 each and got a ton of money. And then they changed the rules. So ones you 3D printed don't count, but they got this whole pile, $21K in gift cards for all these 3D printed things. So they exploited a loophole. So I think that counts as an entertaining form of hacking.
But the plastic part won't last that long, right?
No, probably not. But they don't. But technically, they were paying for it. Then they changed the rules after this. No 3D printed parts. So
Somebody
yeah.
3D print the whole gun, and then it's like a couple of shots, and then it's this crap.
Yes, I would think so. If you 3D printed a gun, I think you'd end up with what they call a zip gun. They make guns out of inferior metal, and they only work a couple times, and then they're broken. But yeah, because 3D printing, I noticed the plastic is pretty soft. So, yeah. Anyway, so this one, some right-wing networks, in particular an account called Libs of TikTok, have been greatly pushing the idea that certain hospitals are where trans children go to get gender-affirming therapy. And although I don't think they do any surgery on children below the age of puberty, anyway, they've made them into they've made people angry about them, just like the previous QAnon stuff where they tell them a pizza shop has children being used as sex slaves. So people have been calling in bomb threats, a lot of them. They've had dozens of them at this Massachusetts Boston Children's Hospital, and the other ones that are specifically targeted by these right-wing places. And this, I think, is what we can expect. This is, most Americans believe there will be a civil war within 10 years, but the sociology experts that I've heard talk about it say we're not going to have a civil war like the last one, where you actually have armies against armies and battle lines, because we're not geographically separated. All the cities are blue, and all the country around them is red. So you aren't able to have a line and say the people below this line are red and people above this line are blue. What we're going to have is like the Irish insurgency, the Irish Troubles, when they had the Catholics and the Protestants, and they were all mixed together. So little bands would form of the Catholics for the IRA, and they would bomb something or something. So we're going to have this kind of thing. We're going to have little groups of angry right-wingers blowing things up. By the way, there's nothing special about the right. In the 1970s, during the Vietnam War, there were little bands of left-wingers that blew things up to protest the war. It's just when a group of people get angry enough, they form these little conspiracies, and you have insurgency and small acts of terrorism performed by small groups. This is, I think, what we're going to have more and more of as our society kind of fractures over, yeah.
Have there been any news reports about some of these, like, white nationalist extremists infiltrating some of the national security apparatus like InfraGard or community policing?
Well, I'm not sure about, the question is whether we've seen right-wingers infiltrating InfraGard. And
But they're in the military, right?
yes, I've seen reports of them in police and the military. I'm not sure they've talked about the FBI. I think FBI I've seen accused too. Logically, almost half of America are Republicans, and a lot of them are now crazy.
But
Like 80% of them believe that the last election was fraudulent. So and like I think 30 or 40% of them hold QAnon beliefs. So any large group of people, 10 to 20% of them are probably oriented this way. So they got to be everywhere in Congress. They're certainly in Congress. They're probably in the FBI. They're probably in the NSA and the CIA and everything.
the military, they check the soldier, once they find out that they are white supremacists, they get them out.
Yes, there have been some efforts to remove white supremacist soldiers, but I think there are also places where that's accepted and encouraged. You know, this is what's going to happen. This is what happens whenever you have.
But those are ones that come out, if they don't come out, then nobody knows.
That's right. I mean, that's right. The ones we hear about are the ones that get ejected. But I mean, when you have a big division in your culture, I mean, 6 years ago, I told a student there's only 1% Nazis in America, but now there's like 30%. And at that level, they're everywhere. And there's going to be whole towns full of it. And, this is,
Hey, Sweden is turning Nazi now.
what's that?
Sweden,
Sweden. Yeah, Sweden's always had a lot of Nazis.
they're turning Nazi now.
Yeah, well, they've always had a lot of them. Read The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. Anyway, let me stop this.